Okay, is my audio activated?
All right. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all today. Welcome to our presentation that we'll be giving you. So first of all, we'd like to check that y'all can hear us. If you can hear us, go ahead and put something in the chat, just like a hello.
Or wave, or just
or
any kind of
wave.
signal.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, nice.
Hi, it's great to see all of you. So in the chat, feel free to put any questions that you may have for us today. We'll be going over those at the end. And please mute your microphones so everyone can hear us and not you. But it's great to see all of you today, and we're really excited. So feel free to put an introduction in the chat too, so because we have a pretty diverse audience right now from what we can tell. All right.
This is the first virtual session of the day of the 2015 Virtual Festival by Carolina Navigators. We're all undergrads here at Carolina. We've all studied abroad during our time here. So my name is Oscar. I was in Bangkok, Thailand for 7 months of this year, all the way from January to like the beginning of August. It's a really cool trip.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Elliot. I'm a junior here at UNC Chapel Hill. I traveled to Brazil and during the summer of 2014. So I was there during the last World Cup. I was a PE teacher during that time for a community center.
All right, and I'm Samantha. I studied abroad in Sevilla, Spain this past summer studying Spanish, and I'm a sophomore here at UNC.
Well, so we have some intro slides. Want to show those?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. So this is just a picture of downtown Bangkok. The maps on the right give you an idea of where we are in the globe. We're in Southeast Asia, and then Bangkok's kind of in the center, and Thailand's kind of the center of that. People say the country is shaped like an elephant, with the long kind of trunk coming up the front. So I was in kind of the top of the bay there is where Bangkok is. That's me. I was at a national park in that picture. Going to talk about Buddhism some later, but there's some pictures of my trip.
Yeah. So like I said, I lived in Brazil, and I was specifically in Bauru. This is a picture of me in Rio de Janeiro, posing with a painting. And then the other picture of me feeding a monkey, that's where actually I worked at. The site that I worked at had a lot of wild monkeys out in the trees, which was always awesome each day because they were a lot of fun to play with. And this is the city that I lived in right here, Bauru, and that's an apartment view.
Okay, and these are some photos of where I was in Spain. The flag's up in the corner there. The photo of me is actually I'm standing on the first tennis court in Spain, which was really cool for me because I'm a tennis player and I enjoyed that. And then we have some photos of the city, the center photos of the Plaza de España, which is like this huge monument that's very important for the country.
Yeah. Okay, great. So today we're going to talk to you about our time in these cities, our experience there. We're going to focus on the cities, what they looked like, kind of how they were organized, how they were different than what we saw here, like where we're from, and also how we got around in them, so the transportation, stuff like that. So you're going to learn maybe why they look this way, consider the history, how those things contribute, how a city is designed, and how it's different than where you're from. So we could just jump into like a conversation.
Yeah.
So like, what were some of the things that surprised you when you first arrived? Like that first day, the first impression, what was kind of going through your head?
It was really hot.
Yeah.
It was really hot. Like I'm actually originally from Arizona, so I was used to the heat, but having lived in Chapel Hill for a while, I was like, oh, it's hot. And it was very different from what I expected. I kind of expected like a small European movie-esque kind of town, but it was very much like an urban city, which was different and interesting.
Yeah, I originally flew into Sao Paulo, which is the capital of Brazil, one of the biggest cities. It's pretty much like New York, congested traffic, nothing I really experienced before, only because I've only lived in like small towns. It took me like an hour on a bus just to like drive 10 miles just to get to another bus stop.
I see that you did that ride like alone. That was your first. Like,
yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was really,
Yeah.
it was really interesting because I didn't know how to speak Portuguese either at the time. I only knew a few lines. I only speak English and I don't speak Portuguese. And I knew please and thank you.
cool. That's
Pretty
crazy.
full, though.
So I arrived in Bangkok exhausted after like basically 24 hours of traveling. I had to fly from North Carolina to Chicago and then to Hong Kong, which is a 14-hour flight. So we arrived middle of the night. It was like 3 a.m., I think. We were actually picked up by some of our Thai friends there. So they like did all the work for us. But kind of like you said, I stepped out of the airport and it was just immediate, just like humidity and heat. And the city had kind of a smell that never went away. And my first impression was just driving in our taxi from the airport to our apartments. It was like a 45-hour-minute drive. And it was just like skyscrapers the entire way.
Wow.
And I had no idea that the city, like I knew it was a big city, Bangkok's kind of renowned in the region, but I had no idea it was just this sprawling and this massive. And that was kind of a theme of my trips, kind of explore all of that. So we have some pictures I think we can share.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Yeah, so this is, I didn't take this picture, but it's a really good picture. This is the river that goes through Bangkok, and you can just see just skyscrapers in every direction. Even if you were on a tall building in my neighborhood, which is pretty far outside the city, you could still see just an enormous panorama of just development and huge city. So that was my first impression, just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in Sao Paulo where I flew into. This is actually Baru where I lived for 3 months. But it was a huge city. It's a lot like Charlotte, North Carolina, if you've ever been there. It's pretty developed compared to most places in Brazil. It had a bus line. It was considered one of the university cities, so it had 4 to 7 universities there. But my first impression of it was just like it was big. It was one of the biggest cities I've ever lived in my entire life, and just a lot of things to learn as far as like learning how to use the transportation system, learning how to get everywhere, and just learning how to read signs in Portuguese was a challenge.
And here's a photo of Sevilla. I didn't take it, but you can see like it's a really nice view of one side of the river because the city is divided in two by the Guadalquivir River, and the tower on the left in the front is called the Torre de Oro, the gold tower. And my last name's Golden, so that was one of my favorite places in Sevilla.
Back to video.
Yeah.
Cool. So like I said, I arrived and I was driven by some Thai friends we had set up beforehand to my apartment. I don't know where you guys were living. I was in an apartment.
Yeah.
I was actually with 15 other UNC students. We all were on this trip together to study energy in Thailand. And it was really cool because we're all in like apartments, not together, but kind of spread out over this complex. So we're all within like walking distance of each other.
That's nice.
So we could visit each other. It was a really cool spot. It was a huge complex of like 10 buildings of apartments. They were all 4 stories tall. And we could like walk to our school. We had a ton of food on the street in front of us. We were maybe like half an hour from like the downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really cool. So where'd you guys live?
Yeah, I was in an apartment too. I traveled with UNC students as well. And we were all placed in home stays, like with families that lived in Spain, which was really cool because they fed us and we got to practice our Spanish with them and just like get to know the community that way. We were all within walking distance because Sevilla is like a very walkable city. It might take you a long time, but it's walkable. And we walked to school. I was in a good location for that.
Yeah, so I traveled by myself to Brazil. I didn't have anyone to travel with, but as far as living condition, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with a host who was his name was Eliel, and he was about my age. But sometimes we would have people living there we would be there with 6 people at one time. And so we'd be moving, and this is a very small apartment. It's like the size of like maybe a kitchen, like a regular sized kitchen. And so we would move out the couch to like right by the stove, and we pull out like another 2 air mattress, and we have literally mattress to wall, and people would just be sleeping. Same thing in like the small little bedroom. We have like 1 mattress and then another air mattress that's touching the wall. And like we would have 6 people sleeping in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Dang.
That's crazy.
I think we have some photos of this too.
Yeah. I'm jealous that you guys had host families because like I feel like you really learned a lot more about the culture.
Yeah.
I was sort of like in a UNC bubble the entire time. So I didn't really learn much Thai. So this is actually the view from the balcony of my apartment. I loved having this balcony because like the street over had a ton of restaurants and I could always hear like live music and stuff at night. It was really cool.
Nice.
So this is sort of the driveway up front, and then the street over, like on the opposite side of this building, was the main like thoroughfare where taxis and stuff would go. But I had this great view every morning. The sun would rise kind of the west of me. It was neat.
That's really pretty.
Yeah, so this is the view from my one-bedroom apartment. If you go down here, it's where you start to hit the main street if you go straight down here. And once you get all the way down that street, you'll hit like a park. Which is really gorgeous. It's really big. A lot of food trucks go out there, and I would go out there and run 2 miles because they had a track, which was great to be able to run.
Nice, yeah. And then this is the outside of my apartment building in Sevilla. There were like 3 or 4 of these in like a square formation, and there was a pool in the center, so that was nice. I spent a lot of time at the pool because it was really hot. But I actually lived like right in this apartment over here, and it had like a nice view of the inside patio. And then on the street on the other side of the apartment, there were a few restaurants, but mostly it was a residential area.
Nice. Cool. So Bangkok for Thailand is like by far the largest city in the country by a long shot. Even the region, it's the largest city. It's sort of the center for trade, for most tourists go there. Is that true? Like your cities, are they pretty much the?
Well, Sevilla is the capital of the Andalusian region, which is it's like Spain is made up of autonomous communities, which are basically like states, and there are 17 of them. So Andalusia is like the southernmost region of continental Spain, and Sevilla is the capital of that. But it's definitely not the largest city in Spain. That's probably Barcelona.
Yeah, Baru was definitely not the largest city in Brazil, but it's definitely one of the more developed ones. Like I said, it was like one of the university cities. So it had 4 to 7 universities in the city. And the roads were all developed, unlike if you went to Rio de Janeiro.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's very large, it had a lot of the Amazon rainforest that's kind of in it. So a lot of the roads were built around it. So you have like single lane roads, very narrow.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was crazy because like Bangkok is this huge, like you said, New York style kind of city. But like if you drove like 2 hours in one direction, you could easily find yourself like in a rice field. It's crazy, just how quickly it shrinks down to still like super rural, like it was 100 years ago. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
So here's some pictures of sort of maps to give you more of an idea where we were, what we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's the globe on the right, again, Southeast Asia, and then Thailand. And so I zoomed in here. Bangkok's right there, sort of in the center. And sort of like where we're from, North Carolina, it has like a little bit of everything. It has beaches if you go far enough south, some of the best beaches in the world. It has mountains and stuff up north, and I got to travel all over here. It was really cool. But here's sort of a zoomed in picture of Bangkok. This is the Chao Phraya River that goes kind of right through the middle. Here's like the Grand Palace, sort of one of the major parks. And this is where all those like super big city pictures come from. I was living down here, and so it was about like 45 minutes to take a taxi down here over the bridge, then into the main city where all the fun stuff was.
Yeah, so this is Brazil. It's pretty much a majority of South America, I think, in my opinion. This right here is Sao Paulo, and this is where I flew in. Like I said, it's a lot like New York. And if you come over, this Rio de Janeiro, and I travel here, and it's a lot of fun. Depending on what part of Rio you go to, it can be pretty developed. And then there's other parts, like I can't remember, but if you go over to the Statue of Christ, you'll see like a very underdeveloped little area. There we go. And then if you travel up north and go into the west, Baru is actually not on this map, but is somewhere probably over here, inland.
Okay, cool. And I made my own map of Spain because Spain's a little different. Most people think of like the country, which is that big red pentagon that says Spain on it, go figure. So all of the red things are associated with Spain, and France is actually like connected to the topmost right-hand corner of Spain, like, and that goes into the rest of Europe. But most people just think of like the main area of Spain, like that big the continental Europe part, but it actually has 2 cities in Morocco, Ceuta and Melilla, and then it has 2 different sets of islands, the Canary Islands and then the Islas Baleares. I don't know how to say them in English. I just don't remember. And so like that's why I made my own map, because most people tend to just think of this part of Spain, but Spain is actually made up of a lot of other parts present in the region. And yeah, Morocco's at the top of Africa, if you didn't know. So yeah.
Cool. That's neat. So we were all living in cities. So how'd you guys get around? I have a story in a few minutes about my crazy transportation system in Bangkok with every form you can imagine. But yeah, not many people own cars where I lived. It was almost all like there were mopeds everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Public transport was really good. People used buses a lot. They kind of shared rides. There were trains. What'd you guys see?
Yeah, actually in Brazil, to own a car was pretty much a luxury.
Yeah.
So they had a really good transportation system as far as the bus system where I lived in Baru. Funny story though, I accidentally broke the how you pay to get on the bus. You use a card.
Yeah.
And it's just an electronic card, so you put it up and it swipes, but when your card is empty, you're supposed to return the card back into the slot.
Yeah.
And it's like a little slot machine, it'll just take it in. Well, when I was doing it, the slot machine kept giving me back my card and wouldn't let me in. So I put my hand over it, basically, so it couldn't push the card back out, and I accidentally broke it that way.
Just like early in your trip?
Yeah, this just happened on my trip, and I still couldn't speak Portuguese very well, so I was like tapping the bus bus driver's shoulder like, I'm sorry, but I broke it. But can you still let me back there? Because they have like a little gate to prevent you from getting into the back of the car.
Gotcha.
Back of the bus.
Yeah, that's funny. See, in Bangkok, you get on and you're like shoulder to shoulder with people sometimes. And this like, they have some like tiny like woman usually who will go around collecting your coins, and they have this like little purse. And they somehow can tell like who just got on and who's been there, who's already paid. And they'll go to you and just give you a little tiny ticket. And I saved a bunch of them. I just forgot to bring them. And then you pay the ride.
Yeah. I walked a lot in Spain because it was really easy to like use the tram system, which is like an above ground kind of subway thing. It's just like a car. There were buses, and then there was like a subway system. So I could use any of them, but I never really felt like I traveled far enough in the city because it was very walkable. Like I just wanted to walk the whole time, like get exercise and really experience the city. But one time, I mean, I did use like the tram for the most part, more than like the other 2 systems. And probably my first weekend when I was there, I may or may not have accidentally illegally rode the tram without paying. My friends and I, we didn't know how to pay for them. Like we just thought you hop on and like that's it. And we just like had no idea whatsoever. And so we like didn't have a card to swipe, and we didn't like have a ticket or anything to put in there. So we rode it accidentally. And the funny thing was we were at the Plaza de España, which y'all saw earlier in a photo. And that was like right by my house, my apartment. And I rode the tram like around, like I just didn't know where I was. And so there was no point in me being on the tram when I could have walked like 5 minutes to where I lived. And it was just like really silly.
Yeah, that was one of the things of being like from North Carolina. I like never use public transport here. I like, even though we have free buses in UNC Chapel Hill, I don't know where they go, how it works. That's just not familiar to us. Like all through high school, I've gotten used to having like a personalized, like a car.
Yeah.
Like my family has a car. I don't know about you guys. Did you take the bus to school or something, or did you walk to school? But yeah, that was definitely a learning curve. Is just like figuring out bus routes and trams, and even like the young kids there in middle school have it just like figured out.
Oh yeah.
You see them on like SkyTrains. It's crazy.
Yeah.
They tend to not make it too difficult, but like if you're not from the city, you just have no idea like which bus route gets you where or where you're going. It takes a while to get used to your surroundings.
In Bangkok, at least, like the signs were in English for where it was going.
Oh, that's nice.
Was it not that way in Brazil?
No. For like my bus stops, I use different restaurants as like my markers when I knew I had to get on. So like they had like a giant McDonald's sign that you could see a good like half mile away. So I knew whenever I saw that, I was about to get off.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's smart.
Yeah. I definitely know from my experience, after I got back to like the States, I definitely started like using the public transportation more. Was that similar to you guys at all?
Yeah, you feel a lot more confident after using like public transportation in other cities and like traveling around Europe. I bused to Portugal from where I lived, and then I flew to Italy, and we took a bus in Italy. So like once you do that in places where you don't speak the language and you just don't know, you feel a lot more comfortable using things in the United States.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like when I first got to Bangkok, we were like terrified to go anywhere like by ourselves. We wanted to like have a Thai friend there, or have them on the phone to talk to the taxi driver for us, or like we had them book planes for us because we didn't know how to do it. And like 3 months later, we were like flying by ourselves. I went on civil trips totally by myself.
Yeah,
like
same.
internationally, on buses. Usually, sometimes like the only like white person on the train. It was really, it was crazy. And so I definitely grew a lot, sort of like you said.
Yeah, for sure. Taking trips by yourself is something I definitely recommend. I didn't do any overnight trips because there are a lot of places like near me where I could take a couple hours bus ride.
Yeah.
But even like just going to the bus station, like purchasing the tickets by yourself and being like, am I on the right bus? Where am I going? It's just really different.
Especially like when you're not in your own country either. Like I was on like the opposite side of the planet of North Carolina and Thailand.
Yeah, no, same thing. I did a lot of growth as well. I knew I was in like a do or don't situation. Like I was either going to like survive in Brazil or I wasn't. And it was when like my host left me to go to Sao Paulo to get his passport for the U.S. actually.
Yeah.
But I had no one with me, so I actually had to go out and like actually speak Portuguese and like order my own food in Portuguese.
Did you feel like you learned a lot of Portuguese while you were there? Like, do you feel more confident?
Definitely. I worked with kids all the time, so they were also teaching me Portuguese each day. And I knew I had like learned enough Portuguese when I told a kid if he didn't behave, he was going to be in timeout. And he told me he didn't understand me, but then another one of my students, Anna, told me that, no, I understood Chu Chin, so I know you're lying.
That's awesome.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the questions?
So one of the questions is, how fluent in English was your host family in Spain?
Oh, okay. So we have a question for me, I guess, because I was in Spain. And it was, how fluent was your host family in English in Spain? And my host family was actually like pretty good at English. I made sure they didn't really talk to me in English, but if we had any like communication barriers, they would bring up a little English, but for the most part, we talked in Spanish a lot. My host mom and my host brothers really liked learning English words. Like they would ask me what I called things, but I was there to learn Spanish. They knew I was there to learn Spanish, and they were so helpful, and like they really encouraged me like to speak with them and like converse with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have another question.
The second one is, were the people friendly and helpful in your countries?
The question is, were the people friendly and helpful in your countries?
Yeah, so Thailand's actually renowned for it being friendly. It's called like the land of smiles, is sort of a nickname for it. It's a super friendly place. Sort of just the general atmosphere almost anywhere is just relaxed, like easygoing. And when you're downtown, sometimes people can be a little bit more hostile because there's so many foreigners there. And so you see a lot more markets kind of trying to sell stuff and be more aggressive. But in my neighborhood, where there were almost no foreigners besides the 15 on my trip, people were super welcoming, and they totally understood when we couldn't speak the language or stuff like that.
Yeah. Same thing with me when I lived in Baru. People actually were really friendly, especially when they found out I was American. They usually tell after my first two sentences in Portuguese, because they said I had a good accent, but they could still tell I had a bit of American one. But as soon as they figured it out, they just wanted to talk to me. They kept asking me questions about my country and everything. It was great because I was already there for about a month. So I could finally start speaking Portuguese a little bit. I was able to converse.
Yeah, I had the same thing. Most people could tell I was from the United States, mostly because of the way like I held myself and the way I dressed. And like you can just feel that someone's not from where you are. Like you know? So people could tell, but they didn't really care for the most part. Like, everyone was so friendly. Like, anyone I spoke to, if I didn't know the word for something, I would kind of describe it and they'd be like, oh yeah, that. And like, everyone was so helpful. I think the defining moment of my trip is we went to a music festival and we were ordering some like food and drinks at one of the tables, and the guy serving us thought we were from one of the beach towns nearby, and we were like, sure, we're Spanish, yeah, let's pretend.
Awesome.
And that was really exciting.
Cool. Nice. So obviously in Thailand, there's no way I was going to be misspoken as like a Thai person. I got mistaken as like Australian a lot, because like Australia is so close, it's a lot cheaper for them to get there.
Yeah.
And so everyone thought we were like from Australia or like Eastern Europe or something. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I learned like effectively no Thai while I was there.
Oh.
I knew enough to like order food and use public transport, but it is a really difficult language. You guys should like Google it afterwards and look at the letters for Thai. It's beautiful, but it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Question.
Another question.
Oh, another
All right.
question.
One is, how was the food in your countries, and what was the weirdest food you ate?
Okay. How was the food in your countries, and what was the weirdest food you ate?
The weirdest food.
The food in Brazil is really good. They had a big meat diet. So for dinner, if you were going out with friends, you eat a lot of meat. So you have like beef, pork, and chicken, like different dishes too. But you have like meat. Unlike here in the U.S. where you have like one meat dish and then like a lot of vegetable dishes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like I had to specifically request when I went over to a friend's house that his mom made like a few salads or something. I hadn't like eaten vegetables in like 2 days. The weirdest thing I ate, I think, was a chicken heart. They were, it was like a Brazilian barbecue. They were really good, though. I didn't think I was going to like it, but I ate quite a few.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Interesting. So the food in Spain is amazing. It's delicious. They have a Mediterranean diet, so they cook more with olive oil instead of like butter, and you can tell a difference in flavors, which I enjoyed personally. And I'm a vegetarian, so Spain does have a lot of meat, but they do eat a lot of vegetables as well. And so my host mom was an amazing cook, and she cooked like great vegetarian foods for me. One of my favorite things was like tomato and mozzarella with basil, which is something you can get in the States, but the tomato and the mozzarella were just so fresh there. Like, I will never experience such a good dish in my life. And the weirdest food I ate, and I know what you all are going to say. You're going to say, Samantha, you're a vegetarian. Why did you eat this? But I ate a snail because Sevilla is really known for the way it cooks its snails. Yeah. And my host mom made some for her family. And she was telling my roommate and I, she's like, just try one. Because she always encouraged us to like try everything. And I was like, well, I'm vegetarian. But then I saw the snail and I was like, if I weren't vegetarian, I would be trying this. And so I tried one and I didn't like it very much. But that was because it still had a face. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Thai food was also amazing, and I missed so many of the things I got there every day. Which is funny because like while I was there, especially like towards the end, I really missed American food. Like I wanted like a pizza or a hamburger or something.
Oh my God, popcorn.
Yeah. But right now, I really wish I could have fresh Thai food. The biggest like adjustment for me was like almost every meal in Thailand can be served with a plate of like white rice. Like even at like 7 a.m. they can go for like white rice, noodles, and it'll be spicy too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the food was amazing. In Thailand, actually, very few people cook in their houses.
Oh.
Like they just did, like my apartment didn't have a kitchen. We had like a sink, and that was the entire complex.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so instead, people eat out. There's street food vendors all over my street. There was restaurants were really popular, and it was super cheap, and so you could afford to.
Okay.
And it was super cheap, healthy stuff. A lot of vegetarian stuff actually in Thailand. Yeah. But the weirdest thing, so I'm gonna cheat and say what one of my friends ate. I took a picture of him eating it. So you basically take like a chicken egg, but it's not like just a yolk or something. It's actually like a slightly developed like chick in the egg. And it has like, it's like a developed like baby chicken. It has like feathers and like a beak and it's like bones.
So sad.
And you eat this entire thing whole. And I thought, to me, that sounded terrible, so I didn't do it. But she said it was actually really good. So that was pretty weird.
We have several more questions. Do you want to do them now, or do you have more?
So apparently no one wants to hear about transportation. So let's do more questions.
Yeah,
we'll
questions are
keep doing
fun.
questions,
They keep
yeah.
working.
So the next one is, did you have any weird experiences?
Did you have any weird experiences?
Hmm.
I'm
Weird
sure
experience.
yes.
Yeah.
Because being abroad is a weird experience.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think my weirdest experience, like, again, I spoke very little Portuguese when I lived in Brazil, especially at the beginning. And I took my kids to a park one day, and there was already about 20 of them. And I had like one other guy, but he kind of left me. But another group of kids from another community center came, and the teacher, and their like supervisor knew I didn't speak like Portuguese very well. Like, I had met them once, and like my director even called them, told them, "You might see this guy who's working for us now, and he doesn't speak Portuguese very well." And their kids saw us playing basketball, and she just gave me her kids, and then like went off on her cell phone.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And
Great.
so I had like 50 kids, and I was all by myself. And the new kids didn't know I didn't speak Portuguese very well.
Oh my gosh, that must have been stressful.
It really was. Like I was teaching them how to play basketball, and like, basketball, all you can have is like a maximum of 10 players.
Yeah.
So it was like really difficult to keep like the kids like calm and subtle, like who weren't playing like on the sideline. And so I had kids who weren't supposed to be playing, like running up to me. I'm like, no, 5 minutes left.
That's funny.
So like you said earlier, like my weirdest experience, I think, was just like, being abroad, the whole thing is weird. It's so different. Like if we were like a student here, our daily life, like it's pretty typical. It's not that different from like high school even. Like we go to class every day, we study, we have exams, we go out with friends on the weekend and stuff. But abroad, it was so different because like you're there for a limited amount of time. And you feel like you want to get the most out of your trips. Like I spent a lot of money to get there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to see stuff every single day. And so that got like super busy. I can actually show my story on the slide.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great.
So this is my little story I'm going to tell about transportation. There was one day in my trip in Bangkok where I ended up taking 6 different modes of transportation. Not deliberately, it happened. It was really funny. So it was a Friday. I didn't have class on Friday. We were leaving that night actually to go to the mountains. We were going to fly way up north to the mountains, but we had all day. So we wanted to have fun. We're going to go downtown. And so the morning actually starts in the top left picture. This is actually my neighborhood outside of the city. And these are called tuk-tuks or tuk-tuks, depending on your interpretation. And these are either like taxis, you can tell them where you want to go, or they just kind of do loops. And so the morning started on one of these. We took it to get breakfast from my apartment. We had our backpack full of clothes because we were going to spend all day downtown. So we got breakfast. But when you want to actually go downtown, these obviously can't go on like a highway. And so you have to get on a bus, which is this picture over here. But this was still kind of early. We didn't know where the bus stopped, how to get there. And so one of my friends actually offered to drive me on the back of his scooter. And so he was driving. I was just kind of holding his like torso, had my backpack on. That's not me. I took this picture though. I saw this from my cafe, these 2 dogs. So he drops me off on his moped. I get on the bus by myself. This is also one of the favorite pictures I took, sitting behind a monk on this bus in Thailand. That was a pretty weird experience. But once you're downtown, it's super different. There are taxis, but the easiest one is actually, it's called the BTS SkyTrain, the Bangkok Transit System SkyTrain. And there's sort of like a subway, but raised above the ground. And so you climb up a flight of stairs, pay, 50 cents. And this circles the entire like Bangkok area. They're super fast. They're really cool. Okay, so we're already at 4, and it's probably noon at this point. So I get downtown. Like I said, this is a picture of downtown Bangkok. Taxis everywhere. They're like 5 different colors taxis for whatever reason. And they're expensive, but they're super easy. Like Bangkok, it's sort of walkable, but it's also just super spread out. And it's also super hot. Like it was like 95 degrees. And so you don't want to walk anywhere. And so usually we'd pay extra and just take a taxi. But my favorite way to get around downtown was actually these boats. Because like I said, the city is surrounded by this river. And all the major sites are really close to the water. Because they like originated from trade and stuff from boats. And so you can hop on one of these little boats and go to the opposite side of the city much faster than a taxi or even the train usually most times. So we used those all day. We went to some parks, went to museums, shopping. End of the day, it's time to catch our flight. And so we got in a taxi, flew to an airplane, and then flew to Myanmar that night and got to our hostel.
Wow.
Of course, exhausted, but so that was my long day of transportation in Bangkok.
Wow. I don't know that I necessarily had like the weirdest experience.